polo shirt hit my desk like a pink slip wrapped in corporate bullshit. Austin Caldwell stood there in his $2,000 suit holding the company gift box like he was presenting a trophy at some country club charity event. That's when I knew they were really going through with it. The CEO's 28-year-old son was about to fire me in front of 30 engineers who'd been depending on my expertise for the better part of 2 decades. I'm Rich Patterson, 52 years old, been building manufacturing systems since before this kid learned to drive stick. 25 years with Midwest Industrial Solutions, starting as a junior engineer fresh out of Purdue back in 1998. Worked my way up through every department: quality control, production planning, automation design, finally landing VP of Engineering in 2015. Built everything from basic assembly line controllers to the advanced automation systems that landed us our first Pentagon contracts during the Obama years. "Enjoy the company polo and the gift card," Austin said, his voice carrying that prep school confidence that comes from never having to worry about mortgage payments. The shirt was already labeled with my name, printed on a sticker like inventory being processed for disposal. Inside the box was a $50 gift card to some trendy bistro downtown that charged $18 for a burger. Oh, and unfortunately, he added like an afterthought, "Your Q4 performance bonus didn't align with our updated success metrics, so that $35,000 won't be processed." Updated success metrics. I wrote the original performance standards back when Austin was pledging his fraternity and figuring out which daddy's friends could get him summer internships. The metrics that had kept this place profitable through the 2008 recession, the supply chain disasters of 2020, and every other crisis that required actual problem solving instead of PowerPoint presentations. I could feel every engineer in that conference room staring at me. Guys I'd hired and trained, people who'd learned manufacturing from the ground up instead of from business school case studies. The old-timers looked sick to their stomachs. The younger engineers studied their phones like they contained escape routes from this corporate train wreck. The only person who didn't flinch was CFO Harold Morrison, sitting in the back with an expression that said, "Don't drag me into this disaster. I already told them this was a bad idea." So I smiled. Not because I wasn't angry, I was furious in the way that only comes from watching 25 years of careful work get dismissed by someone who'd never spent a day on a factory floor. But anger is for amateurs, and I'd been a professional too long to give them the meltdown they probably wanted. I took the polo shirt like it was contaminated material. Held it up, felt the cheap polyester that probably cost the company $12, including the embroidery. "Thanks for the memories," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. Not because I wasn't ready to tell Austin exactly what I thought of his management philosophy, but because situations like this require patience, not emotional outbursts. Before I continue, let me set something straight. This isn't just another story about corporate politics or generational conflict. This is about what happens when entitled kids think they can erase decades of institutional knowledge with consultant reports and innovation buzzwords. This is about the difference between building systems and breaking them. I walked out of that conference room without slamming doors or making speeches. That's important. They wanted drama. They wanted a crazy old engineer story to pass around the break room, something about how the legacy guys can't handle change. I gave them nothing except the quiet sound of my steel-toed boots on polished concrete and the faint smell of machine oil that never quite leaves a real manufacturing facility. Here's what nobody in that room noticed during Austin's performance review theater. HR hadn't prepared any termination paperwork, no exit interview scheduled, no acknowledgement of cause or documentation requirements, just a cheerful email saying my access would be deactivated by 5 p.m. and good luck with future endeavors. That told me everything I needed to know. Someone, probably Harold, had warned them this termination wasn't clean. Austin had been gunning for me since his father promoted him to Chief Innovation Officer a year ago, a position that sounded impressive but basically meant he got to play with expensive technology while calling it digital transformation. Austin had a problem with me from day one, not because I resisted change. Hell, I'd been automating processes since before he knew what a PLC was. His problem was that I had influence with people who actually made things work. I had history. And worst of all, I had credibility with the engineers, the floor supervisors, and the government inspectors who determined whether our defense contracts got renewed. When I'd flagged irregularities in the Q3 budget 6 months ago, like $28,000 labeled innovation consulting that traced back to his college roommate's strategic planning firm, HR told me to focus on constructive collaboration instead of legacy concerns. Legacy concerns. 25 years of keeping production lines running and quality standards met was now a legacy concern. The writing had been on the wall since Austin's promotion. Small things at first. My monthly engineering reports would get accidentally omitted from board presentations. My name disappeared from critical project email chains. Budget approvals started getting routed through new innovation committees that somehow always included Austin's MBA friends from his networking groups. I'd walk into strategy meetings and find my usual seat had been replaced with a motivational poster about embracing disruptive paradigms. Not moved, replaced. Someone had literally removed the chair and hung inspirational artwork where I normally sat. Austin didn't attack directly. That would have required actual backbone. His weapons were passive-aggressive corporate speak and vague management jargon that sounded profound but meant nothing. If I raised concerns about timeline feasibility or budget realism, he'd respond with gems like, "Let's pivot toward solution-oriented thinking," or "I feel like Rich's perspective comes from a scarcity mindset." Scarcity mindset. I was trying to prevent the company from hemorrhaging money on consultants and conference room furniture, while he was billing $22,000 for strategic visioning workshops that turned out to be weekend retreats at his family's place in Traverse City. I walked past the executive offices where managers pretended to study important documents, past the break room where someone was cutting celebration cake for another successful quarter of Austin's leadership, past the reception desk where Sarah, who'd been answering phones since the Clinton administration, offered me a sympathetic smile that said she'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Outside, the Michigan November sky was doing its usual impression of the inside of a steel drum, gray, cold, and completely indifferent to human drama. I sat in my F-150 and stared at that polo shirt for a long moment. Then I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out my personal phone, the one I never connected to company networks, the one with very specific contacts stored under very specific security protocols. The first call was to Patricia Walsh, my attorney, not the corporate lawyers who spent their time making sure nobody got sued for sexual harassment, but a real lawyer who understood intellectual property law and employment contracts. She'd been waiting for this call for 6 months. "They actually went through with it?" she asked when I explained the situation. "Public termination, no documentation, no formal cause beyond performance metrics," I said. "Everything we discussed last spring." "Perfect," she said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background, because the patent licensing agreements just became very interesting. How long before they realize what they've lost? I looked at my watch, 2:15 p.m. On a Tuesday, the Pentagon contract review was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. I'd say they'll figure it out Wednesday night when their automation systems start throwing licensing errors. 6 months earlier, I'd been sitting in Patricia's law office with a stack of paperwork that looked boring enough to cure insomnia. Patent assignment documents, intellectual property transfers, licensing agreements, the kind of legal material that flows through corporate offices like water through a sieve because nobody wants to read the fine print. "You sure you want to go this route, Rich?" Patricia had asked, reviewing the documents I'd prepared over 3 weeks of careful planning. I sipped my coffee black, 2 sugars, the way my dad taught me back when he ran the machine shop, in Flint, and nodded. "They've been treating me like I'm obsolete while I've been carrying this place on my back. Time I got some insurance." The insurance in question was a licensing clause buried deep in our technology modernization contract, hidden in Section 47C, between equipment maintenance schedules and vendor payment terms. The kind of legal language that gets rubber-stamped because it looks like standard boilerplate but was actually crafted with surgical precision. See, while Austin was focused on his flashy presentations about Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing buzzwords, I'd spent the previous year completely rebuilding our automation control systems from the ground up. The old setup was a nightmare, 15 years of different vendors patching together proprietary software that barely talked to each other. Downtime was constant. Quality control required manual intervention every few hours, We were hemorrhaging money on maintenance contracts and emergency repairs, so I designed a new system, clean, integrated, scalable architecture that could handle everything from basic assembly line control to the complex, multi-stage processes required for our defense contracts, the kind of system that would carry us through the next decade without major overhauls. But here's the key detail that Austin and his innovation team never bothered to understand. I didn't develop this system through standard company R&D channels. I built it through my own consulting LLC, Patterson Engineering Solutions, which had been on the vendor roll since 2019 under specialized technical services. It started innocently enough. The company needed help with a compliance audit, and I had more expertise than our internal team. Rather than bill overtime, I set up the LLC to handle the consulting work, saved the company money, gave me some side income. Everybody won. Over the years, the arrangement expanded. Technical documentation, system integration, troubleshooting complex automation problems, all billed through Patterson Engineering at rates significantly lower than the big consulting firms Austin preferred. Nobody paid attention when the billing structure evolved. Nobody questioned why certain development work was being contracted out instead of handled internally. And absolutely nobody read the fine print in the vendor agreements that specified ownership rights and licensing terms. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. If Midwest Industrial terminated my employment without proper cause and documentation, the exclusive licensing rights for all Patterson Engineering developed technology would automatically revert to my LLC. No lawsuit required, no arbitration hearings, just an immediate cessation of usage rights. Was it sneaky? Definitely. Was it legal? Absolutely. Could anyone have caught it if they'd been paying attention instead of planning golf outings and strategic visioning retreats? Without question. I'd tested the entire setup on isolated development. Systems first. Ran it through legal review with an outside firm that specialized in intellectual property law. Everything checked out clean as a whistle. Even our compliance department, bless their overworked souls, had logged all the patents and licensing agreements into the corporate database like routine paperwork. That's the thing about being the quiet guy who actually makes things work. People assume you're harmless because you don't make noise. They forget that the quiet guys are usually the ones holding up the walls that everyone else is leaning on. After all the documentation was properly filed and notarized, I printed exactly one hard copy of the complete licensing agreement, stored it in my gun safe at home next to my grandfather's Purple Heart and the deed to my house. The digital versions were encrypted with military-grade security and backed up in 3 separate locations, one local drive, one cloud service, and one physical backup stored in a safety deposit box at First National. Belt and suspenders, as my old man used to say. If something's worth protecting, protect it properly. I didn't want to use the clause. Let me be absolutely clear about that. I enjoyed my work. Loved the challenge of solving complex automation problems, the satisfaction of watching systems run smoothly, the pride that comes from building something that lasts. I didn't love Austin's condescending management style or his tendency to treat engineering reports like suggestions from the maintenance crew, but the actual work still mattered to me. But every time Austin strutted through the manufacturing floor in his designer jeans, talking about optimizing human capital and leveraging synergistic paradigms to guys who'd been building things since before he learned to tie his shoes, I felt that trigger finger getting a little itchier. And when I discovered he'd been billing personal expenses through vendor accounts like the $31,000 team building retreat that turned out to be his wedding reception at the Detroit Athletic Club, I knew the countdown had officially started. Austin had floated into Midwest Industrial like he'd been airdropped from a Harvard Business Review case study. Designer everything, motivational quotes on his office walls, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never having a real performance review in your life. No manufacturing experience, no engineering background, no track record of actually building anything, just an MBA from Northwestern and a press release announcing his appointment as Chief Innovation Officer. He'd taken over the entire 3rd floor, brought in modern furniture and collaborative workspace design, filled the walls with inspirational posters about embracing transformative change and disrupting traditional paradigms. Then he'd systematically begun taking aim at anyone he perceived as representing the old guard. It started with small moves. My monthly engineering reports would get inadvertently excluded from board meeting agendas. My name would disappear from critical project email chains. Budget approval processes got restructured to route through new innovation oversight committees that somehow always included Austin's MBA buddies from his professional networking groups. The passive-aggressive campaign escalated over months. I'd arrive at strategy meetings to find my usual seat had been eliminated during collaborative space optimization. Project timelines I'd developed based on 25 years of manufacturing experience would get overruled by theoretical projections from consultants who'd never set foot on a factory floor. Austin's preferred communication style was corporate jargon designed to sound profound while meaning absolutely nothing. If I raised concerns about unrealistic deadlines or budget constraints, he'd respond with masterpieces like, "Let's reframe that energy toward opportunity-focused solutions," or "I sense Rich's perspective is anchored in limitation-based thinking." Limitation-based thinking. I was trying to prevent the company from promising delivery dates that violated the laws of physics, while he was billing $25,000 for strategic alignment workshops that were just weekend retreats with catered meals and team-building exercises. The vendetta became obvious to everyone except Austin's father, who seemed determined to believe his son was bringing fresh innovation to a stodgy old manufacturing company. My competence made Austin insecure. My institutional knowledge highlighted his ignorance, and my credibility with the actual workers exposed the emptiness of his management philosophy. So I started documenting everything. Every suspicious invoice, every deleted email, every time project budgets got redirected toward Austin's pet initiatives. I created detailed files organized by date and category, backed up to multiple secure locations. I even recorded several phone calls where Austin referred to experienced engineers as legacy resources and suggested that layoffs might be necessary to optimize our talent architecture. But I didn't escalate through official channels, not yet. Experience had taught me that HR departments exist to protect companies from employees, not the other way around. Instead, I watched and waited and built my case like I'd build any other system methodically, thoroughly, with multiple redundant safeguards. The final straw came in October when Austin announced plans to modernize our operational framework by outsourcing key automation functions to a consulting firm run by his former roommate. The same automation systems I'd spent 2 years developing, that were running flawlessly, that had passed every Pentagon inspection with flying colors. That night, I sat in my garage with a glass of Maker's Mark, looking at the patent documents spread across my workbench next to the carburetor I'd been rebuilding for my '67 Camaro. The whiskey was smooth, the garage was quiet, and the decision was crystal clear. If Austin wanted to play hardball with someone's life's work, he was about to learn that some games have rules he'd never bothered to read. The termination notice went out via certified mail at 3:47 p.m. Tuesday afternoon. Not an email, not a phone call, but proper legal documentation delivered to every board member, including Austin's father, Donald Caldwell. Time-stamped, notarized, and written in language that left zero room for interpretation. Formal notification of licensing cessation pursuant to improper employment termination. Patterson Engineering Solutions, LLC. The licensing verification system would trigger its security protocols at midnight Wednesday, giving them exactly 72 hours to figure out what they'd done. Enough time to panic, not enough time to fix anything meaningful before Thursday morning's Pentagon presentation. I spent Tuesday evening in my garage, working on the Camaro's transmission while Hank Williams Jr. played on the old radio I'd inherited from my dad. The work kept my hands busy while my mind processed what was about to happen. Rebuilding a transmission requires patience, precision, and the confidence that every component will perform its function when called upon, just like the legal strategy I'd spent 6 months perfecting. My phone started buzzing around 11 p.m. First the night shift supervisor, then the automation technician, then someone from IT I'd never heard of. I let them all go to voicemail. Whatever problems they were discovering, they belonged to Austin now. Wednesday morning brought coffee, the Detroit Free Press, and a peaceful silence that comes from knowing you've done everything right while watching other people figure out they've done everything wrong. The first call came at 7:23 a.m. from plant manager Mike Rodriguez, a good man who'd worked his way up from the assembly line and understood how things really operated. "Rich, we've got a situation with the automation systems. Error codes I've never seen before. Something about licensing verification failures." I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the cardinal feeder my wife Susan had insisted we hang before she passed 3 years ago. The birds were busy with their morning routine, completely indifferent to corporate drama. "What kind of error codes, Mike?" System says it can't authenticate the control protocols. All the automated stations are reverting to manual operation. IT says they've never seen anything like it. Sounds like a software licensing issue. You might want to escalate that to Austin's innovation team. This seems above my pay grade now. The second call came from Harold Morrison, the CFO who'd been with the company almost as long as I had. Harold was old school, started as a bookkeeper, worked his way up through every department, understood that profit margins came from efficiency, not consultant fees. "Rich, what the hell is going on with the production systems?" "I wouldn't know, Harold. I'm just a terminated employee enjoying his unexpected retirement. Don't play games. The entire automation network is throwing license errors. Nothing's working properly." I leaned back in my kitchen chair. "That's unfortunate. Have you tried calling Microsoft? Sometimes Windows updates can cause compatibility issues." Long pause. "This isn't a Windows problem and we both know it." "I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe you should discuss it with your Chief Innovation Officer. I hear he's very knowledgeable about digital transformation." The third call came at 9:15 a.m. from Donald Caldwell himself. The CEO's voice had that strained quality you hear when someone's trying very hard not to panic while realizing they're standing in quicksand. "Rich, I was hoping you might be available for a quick consultation on some technical matters." "What kind of technical matters, Don?" "We're experiencing some challenges with the automation systems. Our IT department seems to be having difficulty resolving certain licensing issues. The Pentagon presentation is tomorrow morning, and..." "That's right, the $75 million defense contract review. Big day for Austin's innovation strategy." Another pause. "Rich, I think we should discuss bringing you back as a consultant. Temporary basis, of course, just to help with the technical transition." I watched a blue jay chase the cardinals away from the feeder. Territorial behavior, the jay wasn't even hungry, just couldn't stand seeing other birds succeed in his space. "I appreciate the offer, Don, but I'm not available for consulting work. I'm discovering that retirement suits me." "Rich, please. These Pentagon officials are expecting a full demonstration of our automated manufacturing capabilities. If we can't deliver what we promised, then maybe you should have thought about that before your son decided I was resistant to innovation." I hung up, not out of anger, but because some conversations don't need to last longer than necessary. By noon Wednesday, the situation at Midwest Industrial had escalated from problem to crisis to full-scale disaster. My neighbor Tommy Kowalski, who worked second-shift maintenance, texted me a video from inside the plant. Engineers standing around blank computer monitors, supervisors manually adjusting equipment that had been running automatically for 2 years, and Austin in the middle of it all looking like a man watching his house burn down. The Pentagon presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. Thursday in the main conference room. Brigadier General Patricia Ross, Pentagon Procurement Director, Colonel James Miller, Defense Contracts Oversight, Dr. Sarah Williams, Technical Specifications Review. These weren't low-level bureaucrats looking for photo opportunities. These were the people who determined whether companies qualified for billion-dollar defense contracts over the next decade. Wednesday afternoon, I drove over to Murphy's Diner across from the plant and ordered coffee and pie. Apple with vanilla ice cream, the same thing I'd been getting there since 1998. Through the window, I could watch the parking lot where black SUVs with government plates were already arriving for preliminary site inspections. Pentagon procurement doesn't mess around with unannounced visits. When they schedule a major contract review, they send advance teams to verify that everything they're about to see is legitimate, the kind of people who notice when automated systems aren't actually automated. At 4:30 p.m., I saw Austin come out of the building with 2 men in uniform and a woman in a business suit. Even from across the street, the body language was clear. Lots of pointing at the building, lots of head shaking, lots of Austin gesturing like he was trying to explain something that couldn't be explained. The advance team spent 90 minutes inside the facility. When they came out, their expressions suggested they'd found exactly what they expected to find, a company that had promised capabilities it couldn't deliver. That evening, Patricia called with an update from the legal front. "How bad is it over there?" she asked. "About what we expected. The automation systems are completely locked out. Manual operation only. They're trying to run a modern manufacturing facility like it's 1985. And the Pentagon review? Happening tomorrow morning whether they're ready or not. Hard to demonstrate advanced manufacturing capabilities when your systems are throwing error codes every 5 minutes. What's your position if they try to negotiate? I looked at the patent documents spread across my kitchen table next to the classified ads where I'd been circling consulting opportunities. 3 companies in the region were looking for automation specialists. The phone had been ringing all week with job offers. My position is that they made their choice when they decided institutional knowledge was expendable. Austin wanted to modernize the operation without me. Now he gets to prove he can do it. And if the board wants to discuss terms, then they can start by acknowledging that my termination was improper and illegal. They can publicly admit that their chief innovation officer doesn't understand the technology he's supposed to be innovating. And they can explain to their shareholders why they're about to lose the biggest contract in company history. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray, typical November weather in Michigan. I was drinking coffee and reading the sports section when my phone rang at 8:15 a.m. The caller ID showed the main number for Midwest Industrial. "Rich, this is Harold Morrison. We need to talk." "What can I do for you, Harold? You can stop playing games and help us fix this catastrophe." "I'm not playing games. I'm enjoying my retirement." "Bullshit. You orchestrated this whole situation. The patent transfers, the licensing clauses, everything. I had to respect the directness." Harold had always been straight with people, even when the truth was uncomfortable. "You're absolutely right. I spent 6 months making sure every legal detail was bulletproof. Built myself some insurance against exactly what happened Tuesday afternoon. Why? Because I spent 25 years building systems that work, and I got tired of watching your boss's son break them." Austin thought he could erase institutional knowledge with PowerPoint slides and consultant reports. Turns out expertise isn't as replaceable as he figured. Through my kitchen window, I could see more government vehicles arriving at the plant. The Pentagon team was punctual, professional, and completely uninterested in excuses about technical difficulties. "What do you want, Rich?" "I want Austin gone. Terminated. No golden parachute, no family connections to save his career. I want formal acknowledgement that my termination was improper. And I want Patterson Engineering Solutions to have exclusive rights to maintain and upgrade the automation systems I developed. And if we agree, then the licensing gets reinstated, your systems come back online, and you can try to salvage what's left of your relationship with the Pentagon. And if we don't?" I finished my coffee and looked at my watch. 8:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, Austin would be standing in front of the most important military contractors in the country, trying to explain why his state-of-the-art manufacturing facility was running like a 1980s machine shop. Then you can explain to your shareholders why you lost a $75 million contract because you let a 28-year-old MBA fire the one person who actually understood how your systems worked. The Pentagon presentation was scheduled to start in the main conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. I knew because I'd helped design that room back in 2016 when we landed our first major defense contract. Sound-dampened walls, secure communication equipment, and a presentation system capable of handling classified technical specifications. I drove over to Murphy's Diner and ordered breakfast eggs over easy, wheat toast, bacon. The same thing I'd been getting there for 25 years. Through the window, I had a perfect view of the Midwest Industrial parking lot where 3 black SUVs sat next to Austin's BMW like predators surrounding prey. At 9:15 a.m., I saw Austin emerge from the building with Brigadier General Ross and her team. Even from across the street, the body language told the whole story. Austin was gesturing frantically toward the building, probably trying to explain why their state-of-the-art automation systems were running like a 1940s machine shop. The general listened with the kind of polite attention you give someone who's already failed but doesn't know it yet. The Pentagon team spent exactly 45 minutes inside the facility. When they came out, General Ross shook hands with Donald Caldwell with all the warmth of a funeral director. No smiles, no enthusiasm, just professional courtesy before walking away from $75 million worth of future business. That's when my phone rang. "Rich, this is Don Caldwell. We need to meet. Today." I finished my eggs and signaled the waitress for more coffee. "What can I do for you, Don? You know damn well what you can do. The Pentagon team just left. The contract is dead. Austin is..." He paused, probably looking for words that wouldn't incriminate anyone. "Austin is no longer with the company as of this morning. That's unfortunate. I hope he finds something more suited to his talents. Rich, please. We both know this was your doing. The licensing errors, the system failures, all of it. You planned this. I watched a maintenance crew loading Austin's office furniture into a moving truck. The motivational posters about embracing change were getting recycled, which seemed appropriate. What I planned was protecting my intellectual property from corporate mismanagement. What happened to Austin was his own doing. What do you want? The question I'd been waiting 6 months to hear. First, I want a written acknowledgement that my termination was improper and violated company policy. Second, I want Patterson Engineering Solutions to have exclusive maintenance and upgrade rights for all automation systems I developed. Third, I want a 5-year consulting contract at $750,000 annually. He started, then stopped, probably doing the math. $750,000 per year versus losing $75 million in contracts, plus the cost of rebuilding their entire automation infrastructure from scratch. That's exactly 1% of the annual value of the contract you just lost, I said. Seems reasonable for preventing future disasters. And in return, the licensing gets reinstated immediately. Your systems come back online. And I'll personally call General Ross to explain that the technical difficulties were caused by a temporary personnel issue that's been resolved. Silence on the other end. Then, give me 2 hours. At 2 p.m., I was sitting in the same conference room where Austin had fired me 3 days earlier. The polo shirt incident felt like ancient history now. Present were Donald Caldwell, Harold Morrison, 2 board members I recognized, and Patricia Walsh representing my interests. The written acknowledgement was straightforward. Midwest Industrial Solutions acknowledges that the termination of Richard Patterson was procedurally inadequate and did not follow established company protocols. Legal language for we screwed up. The consulting contract was more interesting. Exclusive rights to maintain and upgrade all Patterson Engineering developed systems. Final approval authority on any modifications or replacements. And a clause specifying that any future termination of the agreement required 90 days written notice and formal cause documentation. Donald signed the papers with the enthusiasm of a man signing his own arrest warrant. The moment the contracts were executed, I pulled out my laptop and entered the licensing reset codes. Within 20 minutes, the automation systems were running normally again. How soon can you contact the Pentagon? Donald asked. I'll call General Ross this afternoon. Explain that we had a temporary technical issue caused by personnel transitions, but our systems are fully operational now. Will she reschedule the presentation? I closed my laptop and looked around the conference room where Austin's leadership philosophy had died a well-deserved death. That depends on whether you can convince her that Midwest Industrial is the same company that built its reputation on reliability and competence, not the company that just spent a year being run by a 28-year-old MBA who thought innovation meant hiring consultants. 3 weeks later, General Ross agreed to a follow-up presentation. This time, the automation systems performed flawlessly. The quality control processes I developed exceeded Pentagon specifications. The production timelines we promised were based on actual manufacturing experience, not theoretical projections from business school case studies. We got the contract, $75 million over 5 years, with options for renewal based on performance. The local business journal ran a story about the deal, focusing on how experienced engineering leadership had helped secure the largest defense contract in company history. I kept the article in my shop next to the photo of my dad in front of his machine shop in Flint. Different generations, same principles. Build things that work, treat people with respect, and never let idiots run machinery they don't understand. 6 months later, Patterson Engineering Solutions had consulting contracts with 4 other manufacturing companies in the region. Word gets around when someone successfully protects their intellectual property from corporate stupidity. Turns out there's a lot of demand for engineers who understand that experience isn't something you can download from LinkedIn learning courses. Austin, according to the industry gossip network, landed a position with a startup in Austin, Texas, developing disruptive logistics solutions for the gig economy. Perfect match, a company with no real assets and a management philosophy based on PowerPoint presentations. I was making more money working for myself than I ever did climbing the corporate ladder. Better hours, better clients, and the satisfaction that comes from being valued for what you actually know instead of how well you fit someone else's organizational chart. The best part wasn't the money or the vindication. It was the phone call I got from Mike Rodriguez, the plant manager, 6 months after everything settled down. Rich, I wanted you to know morale on the floor is the best it's been in years. People feel like they can do their jobs without worrying about getting replaced by some consultant's recommendation. That's good to hear, Mike. You know what the guys call what you did to Austin? I'm afraid to ask. They call it the patent trap, like when you set a mouse trap and wait for the right mouse to come along. I laughed. Austin wasn't really a mouse, more like a bull in a china shop who forgot that someone else owned the china. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even. Sometimes it's just being absolutely right and having the patience to prove it. Sometimes it's building something so well that when people try to break it, they end up breaking themselves instead. And sometimes it's sitting in your garage on a Saturday morning, rebuilding a carburetor with Hank Williams on the radio, knowing that the systems you built are running exactly the way they're supposed to, maintained by people who understand that competence beats confidence every single time. The Camaro runs like a dream now, just like everything else I've ever built properly.